because I'm going light to dark and I'm going darker over here, that this will eventually, that bloom is going to disappear underneath the additional layers of stronger concentration and darker color. Let me see, I'm going to mark that in because I can't really see it. And note to self, make sure I have plenty. In this next mix, which is actually going to be mostly peacock blue and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Yeah, so between having both of those guys mixed up, I'm pretty certain I'm going to have plenty of paint. Once again, better be in frame. I suppose it might make more sense to just always, when you're cutting in like that, starting at the top. I don't know, I think that's a little bit of a judgment call, and it feels kind of different depending on what you're painting or how you're feeling that day. So clearly I have plenty of much more wet color to where it's pooling much easier. It's going to make it easier to make this a nice flat wash. And it is a swatch sample, so I'm intentionally not being agonizing over the exactness of the lines too much, as it's fairly obvious to see. And I encourage you to try to learn when it's good to really worry about perfection of edges and when it's okay to let that go. Oftentimes it's better to let it go, especially if you're you've gotten a nice, if you're looking to get a flat wash and you've gotten a nice even distribution of watery color. It's more important. That's more important, at least to me, than making sure the edges are all perfect, because if you go back and try to perfect all the edges is when you'll start running into the issue of too much water, drying it different. So this is getting nice and strong. Hopefully you can see that by approaching it in this way, there's this cool building up of paint, and the lower layers are impacting how you're seeing this upper layer and the higher layers. I'm going to dry this a little bit just to make sure it's all the way dry, because when you are layering things, you do want to make sure that it's all the way dry. I'm very curious just how loud that is in this microphone. Now for the next layer, I'm going to mix up a pretty concentrated mix of the cooler red. Hopefully one thing you can see is we're just sort of making a little bit, we're sort of making our way around the color wheel. and pretty concentrated quinacridone rose. Excuse me. No, it is. Yes, it's quinacridone rose by M. Graham. So I'm going to come in and I'm not going to paint that and that and that. So once again, I'm going to create sort of this new shape. I'm thinking about the shape that I'm painting before I start painting. And I want to make sure I have that in my mind, because all this can get fairly confusing trying to keep track of what is what. Using a very gentle touch, and I'm not leaning into the brush. Mostly I'm just trying to kind of coax along that pooling color where I want it to go. I mean, I could, I think I may have already said that. Technically, you could do this without touching the paper at all. I'm pulling color with a brush, and I'm not touching the paper. That can get a little too worrying about technique, in my opinion, and not having fun. So it's fun to brush on some color, but I like to brush it on, but sort of keep that notion in mind that I'm going with a really light touch, and I'm not leaning into it. Mostly I'm coaxing the watery color, the pooling color down the page. When I am checking, you'll see me using the back of my hand. That's sort of a common watercolor technique, just to kind of see if it's cool to the touch. And theoretically, the back of your hand has less oils in it than, or dirt and oils, than your index finger. So if you do it that way, you can bring in oils that will change how the paper is going to receive the paint. That's drying, yes. I'm going to make sure this one is dry. I'm doing some pretty aggressive hair drying. I encourage you to, I'm doing that mostly to make it fast for the recording, but a better approach is to sort of sneak up on it, starting with a lower setting and not too hot and not too close, so you're not blowing around the paint, any wet paint that might be still on that shape. So now I'm going to, for the blue, I'm going to mix up a little bit more concentrated mix of just the ultramarine blue. That's a nice mix. And I'm going to once again identify the shape that I'm painting. I'll start at the upper part here. That was a weird little stroke I did. I was thinking, oh, I'll start here and then bring that to it, and then thought, well, maybe I'll bring this to that. Um, you know, it's not like it's so critical that you're never going to be able to clean things up if for some reason there's a stroke out there in the middle. But now I am going to try to sort of redefine the line of pooling paint. Can reestablish the amount of water in there. Thirsty brush. I'm gonna be a little bit more of a perfectionist and try to clean that edge up a little bit. Look at that, it's not perfect. Okay, I'm going to stop the video now.